Turn It On, the Level 42 fan podcast, is in no way affiliated with the band. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed are solely the speaker's own.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to Turn It On, the Level 42 fan podcast. We are here with our typical trio from here in the U.S., here to talk the time away with all things Level 42. I'm Bob Considine with Mr. Mikey Payne and Mr. Winston M. Walker, Windman with many faces and many names. Gentlemen, welcome. It's good to talk to you guys today.
Hey, happy holidays, everybody.
And we're going to get right to it, guys, because joining us is not only one of our most favorite people, but also one of the busiest. As you guys know, he's been doing some serious globe trotting with Level 42 the last few months. He has a surprise new single called Perplexity coming out. He'll be playing another highly anticipated solo show at Union Chapel in London on December 21st, where he will also have some very exclusive merchandise that we're going to talk about. And then he looks forward to a very busy 2025 as Level 42 tours behind the 40th anniversary of the World Machine album. So guys, let's pick his brain while he's gracious enough to give us a few minutes. Mike Lindup, thanks so much for being here. And how you holding up?
All right, thank you. I mean, I've really got to make sure that I take care of kind of my health with all of this running around because, you know, we've just come back from a show in Santiago in Chile, and then a show in Cancun in Mexico, and then 6 shows back to back in Europe, Holland, Germany, and Switzerland. Now, the maximum we normally do is 4, and then have a day off just to kind of rest the voices and everything. But so 6 was quite a push, and especially after the coming back from the Americas and, you know, jet lag and et cetera, et cetera. So I'm kind of having a day of rest today. I actually traveled up. I got back into London yesterday, stayed at my sister's, and then I traveled up, the day before yesterday. Traveled up yesterday, which takes most of the day to get back to Scotland from London.
Right.
So today being Sunday, you know, I was intending to go out and do a bit of shopping and maybe go for a row in the village skiff, which is a 4-man rowing boat with a cox, which kind of goes out once a week on the loch in front of me here.
Wow.
Oh, nice. Lovely.
I wasn't sure of my plans, so I didn't put my name down. And then I thought, well, I might have enough time to do it. But then I thought, I'm going to be fitting it in, and I'm still, you know, finding my feet. You got to always have time to let your body ground somewhere if you can. Yeah. And you know what it's like if you're doing something and you're busy and you're rushing about and you're stretching yourself. It's usually when you stop that, yeah, the sort of the little bugs in the body go, aha, we're going to get you.
I was just going to say, Mike, this was actually the first thing I was going to ask you on my page is the stamina that you need right now, because you know, we're all older now. And even before these dates you just mentioned, you were in 3 cities in Japan and then Singapore before the Chile, Cancun, Germany, Switzerland. And is this getting harder to do? I mean, you look great. It looks like you just, you know, been resting for 5 months, but
well, you know, I mean the Japan, Singapore dates, there was a break of about a month in between that and going off to South America and Mexico. So there was time to recover. Although, I mean, I was doing stuff. I was mainly at home. You know, it does take a lot of stamina. I make sure that, you know, I warm up before I sing on stage pretty much every time. Although, funnily enough, when you're kind of doing regular shows with the singing and playing, you're kind of oiling the machine, as it were. So it's not so bad. It's actually worse when I'm not doing anything, that's really when I need to do the singing exercises, is when I haven't got any live gigs, because it was actually quite interesting in the pandemic, because everything was cancelled for, months and months and months. And I was going down to the studio recording changes too, but I was discovering that I'd lost the kind of vocal stamina, and which was a bit of a shock, to be honest. I was like doing vocals for Atlantia, which is quite high,
Oh yeah.
and I was discovering that, after a few takes, my voice was kind of getting a bit shot. And Mike, the producer, who's very good with the vocals, he kind of said, listen, take a break, blah, blah, blah. We can come back tomorrow and do some. I thought, wow, that's really interesting. Like, it is, your larynx is actually a muscle, like any other muscle, that if it isn't in training, it gets weaker. So I've sort of taken care of that. And I always tried to look after, in terms of food, try and eat healthy, always try and do some exercise. I mean, I do park run, which is a 5K volunteer organized run here in the UK and other parts of the world. I do that sometimes. I try and go for at least a walk every day, because my family, particularly on my mother's side, there are a lot of walkers in the family, and they all live to grand old ages, and including my mum. So there's definitely something in that.
Yeah. Well, if I could, I'm going to speak for Mikey and Winston here. Obviously, offering condolences with the loss of your mom, Nadia Cattouse, who lived really an amazing life. Mike, born in British Honduras, which became Belize, and one of the first Caribbean women volunteers to join the women's branch of the British Army called the Auxiliary Territorial Service during the Second World War, and then found success as a folk singer and actress after the war. So, not to get too personal, Mike, but how are you coping? And also, how nice was it to see all the love for your mom and for you afterwards?
It was amazing. It was really, really incredible. I mean, she was 5 days off her 100th birthday when she passed. And,
Amazing.
although, of course, we were all hoping to celebrate her 100th with her, I actually wouldn't have been there. I was in Santiago, Chile on her actual birthday. So I was going to go and celebrate a couple of days before I flew out, and then, do a video call in, which I ended up doing because two of my relatives from Belize flew over, especially for the birthday. And even though Mum had passed, they decided to come anyway, so that was really nice. There was a few more cousins online, so we kind of toasted her on her actual birthday on a WhatsApp video call, which was lovely. But the response to, all the messages from people that, from everyone, from people who just found out about her and only really knew her as my mum, to people who'd worked with her or had sung with her or read something online about her extraordinary life. It's been incredibly kind of gratifying. And I was, me and my sister were spending like the couple of days after she died, I was just on the phone all the time, just answering people and thanking people and really it's been an amazing celebration of her life, as it were, and it's been lovely to be able to share it with people. I mean, one of the blessings of the internet, I know there are many curses, but one of the blessings is to be able to touch base with cousins in Belize, directly, and people in the States, because a lot of the diaspora in America and Canada. It's been amazing, and it's sort of like, I guess it'll be an ongoing process for a while, just soaking it all in and because no matter how expected it is, Mum nearly 100, obviously she was going to pass at some point. So, and she had a full life, and, what's great is on the actual death certificate, it says she died of frailty of old age, which I think is a remarkable achievement in itself.
Yeah.
But your mother's your mother, so
that's the other thing. Yes.
You don't really know how it's going to hit you, and I think it kind of, if you like, I don't know how it's going to hit me, whether it's going to be a hit or it's going to be a gradual thing, but there will be a process. As I suppose I had a bit of experience when my father passed, although he passed rather suddenly at a much younger age, unexpectedly. So it was a kind of different grieving process. But I know the grieving process takes time. and there's going to be echoes of things that happen. But I feel definitely that she was, she was confined to her bed in the last years, and she was on liquids, and you know, she couldn't really hear very well or see very well. She couldn't even speak very well, except the last time that I visited her in person, she actually found her voice again and was able to respond, which was amazing.
That's
Oh,
great.
lovely.
That's a
Awesome.
really beautiful way the last thing I said to her was, "I love you, Mum," and she said, "I love you too." And just to hear that when I thought that she couldn't speak anymore, it's incredible. And that was about 10 days before she actually passed. So I was treating every visit as it may be the last time. And I think, her body was very strong. And I think maybe a bit too strong. I think she kind of probably was in the waiting room for a while, and now she's kind of free of all of that. And I imagine that she's in this amazing, dimension that I believe that we all go to when we kind of pass and leave our bodies, and that something about us that is the essence of us, if you like, isn't something that dies. We just have this human experience. And I could obviously go on and talk, more kind
Right.
of about that, but that's not the nature of this podcast. But anyway, I'm kind of happy for her. And, I'm sure there'll be some more tears when we come to the actual funeral and I'm actually face to face with people. And, I haven't actually said goodbye to the body yet. That's another thing that I think is important to do. So, we'll see.
Okay.
Well, we appreciate your time. You've been very busy and with the grieving process. Thank you for being here.
Absolutely, Mike.
I had just two more questions about your mother, Mike. First of all, what was her response to when you kind of made it in the 80s, like to see you doing so well as a musician when she was a musician herself? And also, every picture I see of her, she's playing guitar, and in the recordings I hear there's always a guitar, and I was wondering if she played them on the recordings, the guitar, and if she ever tried to teach you guitar.
Well, I'll go to the second question first. She didn't try and teach me guitar. I think because I started mucking about on the piano when I was about 3, and I started having lessons when I was 6. I think would have been fairly obvious to both my parents that was the instrument that I'd chosen, as it were. I mean, the sitting room was kind of like a playroom. So there was an upright piano, there was Mum's guitars, there was some hand drums from China and Africa that I used to muck about on. And then later on, there was a reel-to-reel tape recorder, which I was allowed to play on. So, that would be me singing Beatles songs and finding the tape echo control and stuff like that. And of course, there was the radiogram, or, radiogram, for those who don't know that term, is like a cabinet which houses a record player and speakers and a radio and the space for like LPs and singles.
Right. Okay.
And that was, the eclectic record collection that I grew up with. So, I was often in the sitting room. And then later on, when I took up the drums, then that's where my drum kit was and so on. So I would fiddle about on her guitar, but I never kind of learnt how to play it. She had an auto harp as well, which was great fun because you just press a button and play a chord. So it was just kind of like a playroom, really. And she played guitar. I think she would have said, she wasn't a great guitarist. She could sort of pick out some chords, but she would always have an accompanist who was a better guitarist with her. So on the records, you might hear her playing. Probably on the recordings, you probably hear a couple of other guitarists. Okay. But when she performed live, she'd always have a guitar with her most of the time. But she'd have someone else kind of filling in and doing all the twiddly bits, as it were.
Wow. Mike, what was the best advice your mom gave you, both musically and personally and professionally?
Well, I mean, this comes back to Bob's first question, which is, how did she feel about my success? She was very... I think I probably inherited this from her as well. She was quite cautious. seemingly. I think behind it all, she was very proud. But she wasn't of that generation that would say, "Oh, I'm really proud of you." It'd be more like, "Be careful about this and make sure you do that," and so on and so on.
Right.
You know, and I wasn't old enough or wise enough to kind of see behind that there was a real compliment there. I would always kind of, I was attuned to hearing criticism, "Oh, mum, why can't you say that, that it's brilliant? Why do you have to, it's kind of like when I first rushed home after the first jam session, me, Dominic Miller, because he was the first,
Right.
because he was at college and I'd met him before Mark and Phil. So I booked the percussion room. There was me, Dominic, Phil, and Mark. That was the first jam session of the proto, what became Level 42. And then Boone came along for the second. And I remember going home really excited about the prospects of this group that we'd formed. And I said, it's amazing. And it's an amazing bass player, Mark. And, it's going to be fantastic. And Mark, mum was kind of like, calm down, dear, don't get overexcited, That's kind of what I remember. And then, coming to concerts and coming to see us at Hammersmith Odeon and, complaining about the fact that she had trouble actually getting backstage and, she didn't have the right guest pass and that's it. And I was like, Mum, we just played in front of thousands of people. So, and she would, and she was very kind of hot on, I get a feeling that she wanted me to really kind of be in my power and assert myself. And she would sometimes say things like, look at Mark, he's really out there and he's doing his thing and you should be too. And I kind of felt like I was being compared unfavorably and I didn't hear it. I couldn't take it necessarily in the right way. So but unfortunately, that's the kind of parent-child dynamic, I suppose, that will show up in different ways.
I think we've all probably had that.
Oh,
Especially if
yes.
you have siblings, because my older sister was the genius, and my schoolwork, I was more interested in sports and other things. So it was always, see what your sister's doing. You should do that.
Yeah.
But Mike, you're also, if I've ever sent you a positive review from back in the day, you're like, I only remember the negative ones.
Well, that's the story. I mean, we did have a few high-profile negative ones. I mean, partly I think because of the time that Level 42 was becoming successful. It was after punk, and after punk, there was the kind of indie group starting and the New Romantics, and there were groups singing about Thatcher's 80s and the miners' strike and Electric Avenue and Ghost Town and
Right.
London Calling and all of these kind of things, which it seemed like the music press of the big papers of the day, because this is a different time, this is before the internet, so the media were really important and critical. So the New Musical Express and the Melody Makers, those are two music papers that we all grew up with. And as you rush to the paper to see what they said about your album, and if there was something that was non-committal or sneering, you kind of really take it personally. And at the same time, they'd be praising some other group, and you think, oh, and there was a review of Love Games which said, they were talking about supermarket music and crimpling slacks and so on, and
Oh, Lord.
guys who like Level 42 were the guys that drove Ford Cortinas and had furry dice, hanging from the, and there was this kind of sort of put downy thing. But when I actually met a couple of those journalists years later, at least one of them said, actually, I quite like Level 42, but I was never allowed to admit it in the office, kind of thing.
Yeah, totally.
That's a shame.
Mike, I just had one more question about your mom, because as I was reading about her, really a fascinating life. But at one point, she did a song called Long Time Boy, 1961. It was produced by George Martin.
Yes.
So when you come around to 1989 and George Martin is kind of the MD for the Prince's Trust, do you walk up to him and say, hey, you produced my mom once?
No, because I didn't know that fact at the time,
Oh, really?
or if I did know it, I'd forgotten it.
Mhm.
I'd somehow I didn't know or remember that George Martin produced Long Time Boy.
That's crazy.
Um, Years, my mum did say there were two versions that she recorded.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, no, that wasn't in my head at all. In 1989, I mean, luckily George was quite enamored with the job that Level 42 did as a sort of backing band for all the different artists, and he was conducting the City of Birmingham Symphony Orchestra, and out of that, you know, he actually booked me to do a couple of gigs with him. One was a performance of Under Milk Wood, which is a kind of a staged version of Dylan Thomas's sort of iconic book of prose,
Mhm.
with like Anthony Hopkins.
Wow.
And this was done at Air Studios in Lyndhurst, which George Martin had bought, and I was in the band. And then we did another show, which was a tribute to John Lennon, with the London Symphony Orchestra and a rhythm section, and I was the keyboard player in that. And that was George booking me, so I was very lucky to work with him. And obviously being a huge hero, being a massive Beatles fan when I was a kid.
Yeah.
But no, I didn't remember that connection. Otherwise, I would have brought it up.
Right. Right. Okay.
Mike, is there a song of your mom's that maybe those who don't know your mom's history should check out or listen to? Or is there one that's special to you?
Yeah, I mean, definitely Long Time Boy. She didn't actually write it. It was already existing as a sort of traditional song, and you'll find other versions of it, like Long Time Gal and so on. But she adapted and arranged it, and she has a credit for doing that. But that version became hugely popular in Belize and beyond with the diaspora. So I would say that would be a starting point. Another song that she did write that she's very proud of is Red and Green Christmas. And that's kind of hard. It's harder to find, and I don't think she ever recorded the definitive version of that. There's a version on her album Earth Mother that she later would say to me that she wasn't satisfied with because she thought it was the producer made it a bit too kind of contemporary of the time. In other words, the sort of 60s, swinging 60s. And she recorded a few demo versions with me, but she seemed to never kind of find the one that she was happiest about was one that was done on a cassette, just recorded off a cassette recorder in the living room when a friend of hers came round, and I was on the piano and my sister was chiming in, and it's very scratchy, but I think she liked the spirit of that recording. But yeah, Red and Green Christmas, and then any of her other songs, I suppose, because I think she had that talent, probably because of her love of singing and her love of the words and the story of the song, but also, she'd been trained as an actor, so she could really, bring a song to life and make it her own. There's a song called Beautiful Barbados on her first album, which is a wonderful song. And if you didn't know, you'd think, well, she must have really loved Barbados. And I think she loved the song and she loved the sentiment of celebrating where you're from. And I think she probably was thinking of Belize and her connection to Belize, but she's singing about Barbados.
Well, I can tell you that I wish I could have met your mom. What I've learned from what you've been putting out on social media, Mike, just an incredible, inspiring life. And some friends of mine actually got to meet your mom when you did a poetry reading in Brighton several
Ah,
years ago,
yes.
and they got to meet your mom, and that was the high point. It beat your poetry. No, they loved your poetry, but they really enjoyed meeting your mom.
Yeah.
And I'm really happy to see you take a swim in the sea there near Belize. I bet that was amazing.
Well, if we hadn't have had these pesky European dates straight after Cancun, I would have gone down the road
Right.
to
Because it was
Belize.
horrible, wasn't it, Mike?
Yeah, 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 I know. It was, getting up at 7 a.m. to beat the heat of the day, to get into a warm sea and swim, and then go and have breakfast. I mean, that's my idea of heaven, basically. And whenever I have gone to Belize, and the gaps between my visits are far too long, it's about every 10 years, really. Whenever I've gone, it's like there's another side of me that comes out, that kind of remains dormant when I'm in the UK, even though I'm born and bred here in Britain. There is a side of me that comes alive in that climate with those people and, with that food and with that sea and so on.
Well, it's kind of like what your mom said in an interview, wasn't it? She was very happy to be English and living in England, but she
Mm.
was very proud to be Belizean and live in Belize.
Yeah, she never wanted to go back, which I was surprised at, especially in her later years. I would say to her, don't you want to spend your last years in Belize? But she never did. She always, was happy to stay in London and live in London and be here. She was always very connected with people in Belize, either via long telephone calls or reading the newspapers from Belize that were posted to us that came through the door, just speaking to people in the diaspora. There was one cousin who passed away in 2019, Compton Fairweather, was living in New York for a long time, and he was a real kind of bush telegraph, and so mum and him, they kind of knew what was going on almost without hearing it, and they would swap stories and information and so on. And he was a lovely man, Compton. I went and read at his funeral in 2019. That was the last time I went to Belize, just a short trip, just to sort of pay tribute to him. But he started a record label and he recorded a lot of the Belize bands. And there is
Cool.
there is a CD that came out a few years ago that he produced called Belize Boil Up. If you can find it, it might even be on some of the digital platforms as well. Belize Boil Up, and it was on a label called Cult Cargo. And it features Mum's longtime boy, but it features some of the other bands of Belize from the kind of 70s and 60s, Lord Rayburn and so on. A couple of bands that I actually saw when I was in Belize in the 70s. And I think I had a jam session on the drums with one of them at one time, I just remembered recently.
That's crazy.
Lovely.
So I have a question regarding, so you've got a big gig coming up in London at the chapel,
Yeah.
21st of December. So obviously you're going to do sort of a bunch of your material, and you do have that new single coming out, Perplexity, that we're all dying to hear. Are you going to play some tunes, preview some tunes from the upcoming album? And if so, do you have a title for that new album?
There isn't an upcoming album yet. There's just
No?
Perplexity as
Oh,
a
okay.
the new single. The album launch at Union Chapel is the vinyl version of Changes 2.
Right.
Maybe I
Oh,
didn't make that clear.
gotcha.
Sorry, I wasn't clear on that in the intro. That when
Yeah, so
I got excited.
it's the vinyl version of Changes 2, and it's a double album, so all the tracks are on there. And I went along to the mastering. My publisher had a connection with a mastering engineer in Scotland, on the other side, on the East Coast, and he is fantastic. He moved up from London at the beginning of the pandemic, and he lives there, and he did a fantastic job remastering it, and I can't wait to hear these test pressings. But yeah, so the idea with the new single Perplexity, that was my producer's idea, because they sat me down as we were coming to the end of the Changes 2 recording and mixing process and said, rather than you wait or everyone waits another 7 years before the next Mike Lindup album, as we're in a kind of good seam of working together and it's been very productive, why don't we, if you've got any more songs, why don't we just keep releasing a song every few months so that everyone who likes Changes 2 has got something new to listen to, and rather than this being this kind of big sort of gap with no output until I've got the next 12 songs ready for the next Mike Lindup album. So that's the idea. And so I'm going to be dropping, I've already going to start on the next recording for what will come out next year, if you like. And by the end of 5 years time, I might have enough material for another album, or I can at least cherry pick from the singles I've released. But I'm not even thinking of an album. I'm just thinking, what song has kind of really got me buzzing? What idea do I really want to output? And Perplexity was the first one I wanted to do. and it being an instrumental, it's something different to what
Oh,
I've done on
yes.
Changes to as well.
Mhm.
So I
We
can't
love
wait for you guys to
instrumentals.
hear it. I really can't wait. It's the rhythm of it is taken actually from something called Belize down, which is a drum rhythm that a lot of the groups and artists in Belize would use, and it's not a unique rhythm to Belize. You'll find it in other parts of the Caribbean and Latin America, and it's kind of African origin, if you like. But it's very simply on the drums. The bass drum's going dum 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 dum, and the hi hat's going playing 16 dum 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 dum. And I was mucking about because on tour, I try and, I bring my laptop and sometimes a little keyboard with me because quite often, you get ideas for songs or new tunes when you're traveling.
Right.
I do certainly.
Sure.
And
Right.
I was mucking about on the keyboard and I had this kind of major minor idea and I put a kind of salsa type bass line to the idea and then I sort of stuck it down into Logic on my laptop and then I put this proto kind of Belize down drum rhythm, programmed it underneath it, and thought, I like the vibe of this. It needs a tune, so then I composed the tune and then the B section later on. And I've actually performed it live already once. This was cause this was a few years ago. This idea came up, and I did a show at a club called the 606
Right.
in Chelsea,
Yep.
and I had Yolanda on bass,
Mhm.
and I had a guy called Jack Pollitt on drums, who was a friend of Yolanda's, who I'd never worked with before, but was really good. Um, an amazing guitarist called Mike Outram, who's a fantastic jazz guitarist, and Summerdo on vocals, who's sung on many of my
Yeah.
things before. And we did a version of it. I mean, it was an early version, if you like, but it was. And then it kind of sort of went back in a box. And then when I was thinking about what do I want to do new, I thought I think that this might be these guys, Mike and Tony, they're fantastic producers. I thought, they've really taken some of my very basic ideas with Changes to, and together we've turned them into, these, I think, wonderful versions of the best versions that they could be of themselves. And I thought they could probably do a similar thing with Perplexity. And they loved it. They loved the demo. I had it all composed, as it were. And then it was a case of bringing it out. So then it's like, Mike, you're going to do the drums. And so I'm doing the drums. So I'm having to warm up and book a drum rehearsal studio when I come down to London to sort of shake the cobwebs out and stuff.
So you're doing the drums, and it's not programmed drums on this track?
No, the bass drum is programmed.
Okay.
Bass drum is programmed, but the hi-hats are live and the snares are live. But I mean, they're sort of chopped up. It's kind of done in layers.
Mhm.
So I'm not sitting down at a kit and trying to play the whole thing. So I'm doing the hi-hat one pass, I'm doing the snares in another pass, doing toms, cymbals in another pass, and so on. But it's nice because it kind of gives it gives it a more contemporary, if you like, production quality to it, but it still has a live feeling to it, which is lovely. And I got the Rhodes out and I got the Mini Moog out, and they're very heavily featured on this. And then I'm singing along with the melody, and then through my friend Chris Frank, the guitarist from Delata, he put me onto this amazing Brazilian singer called Carolina Lelis, who did the backing vocals on it, and she's doing counter melodies and stuff, and it's a beautiful thing, and it's really up my street, in a way that it wouldn't be fair to say I don't care if no one else likes it, because that's not what I think. But in a way, if no one else does like it, I won't mind because I love it.
Will we hear this new song Perplexity at the Union Chapel gig?
Oh yeah, I'm definitely going to be playing it there for sure. It'll obviously be a different version because I'll have to adapt it for the live group that I have.
Right.
But
So
it'll be out on digital before that. You'll be able to listen to it, and
Fantastic.
I like the idea of keep dropping stuff until you decide to do another album. As fans, obviously, we love that.
Yeah.
I did see that at the Union Chapel gig, the album's going to be available, the vinyl. And I know a lot of fans have been asking, when the vinyl goes up for sale online or wherever, will you be signing copies or?
I will do my best to do that. I mean, we've still got to arrange this. I mean, the thing is, it's not quite as simple as it sounds because, well, first of all, the concert, for the concert to go well, that's the priority for me. We're trying to arrange it so that we can get like some kind of pre-sale or early copies there, and while I'm there to sign them. But we're a bit limited by time because they have a very strict curfew. So there isn't like I can't like hang around for hours after the show and spend lots of time with people because everything's got to be packed and out, by 11 o'clock, as it were. So we're just trying to work that out, and we will figure out a way. And I definitely am going to be signing. Whether I sign some there or I go to where the albums are produced and we get a list of requests of what people want signed, and I'll do them like I did with the Changes vinyl release. But I'll figure out a way to do that. I'm definitely up for that, and personalizing, people's copies of their vinyl.
Awesome. Any
Have-
update on I'm sorry, I just kind of took over here, but any update on who will be in the band?
Well, I can say for sure that it's going to be Yolanda on bass, John Sam on drums, who did was on drums at the Jazz Cafe last year.
He was
Awesome.
He was actually Yolanda's suggestion. I said, "Are there any young guys that you really?" Because she's got an amazing feel, so I kind of trust her judgment. I said, "Do you know someone?" She said, "John Sam's really solid, and I've not done much with him, but I love playing with him." I thought, well, that's a good enough recommendation. And he did great at Jazz Cafe. So it's him and Alex Hutchings on guitar again. Again, he was at the Jazz Cafe, and he's playing the solo on Time to Let Go, and he's a phenomenal guitarist and soloist, particularly. And Satin Singh on percussion, who is on Perplexity and on Changes too, and was at the Jazz Cafe. So that's my core band, if you like. On vocals, I've got Carolina Lellis, who sung on Perplexity, and Shelley Nelson, who I played with at the Jazz Cafe on a Nathan Haynes gig, and she's fantastic. Young singer, and I think the thing is that this venue, Union Chapel, as the name suggests, it was a church. Mm-hmm. So it's got more church-like acoustics, and I haven't been there in person, but I've seen some clips of it online, and I've heard from people who've worked there. So if you like, the acoustic is not as funky as the Jazz Cafe. It's not a club kind of acoustic. So I'm thinking now of showcasing songs from my catalogue as well as Changes too from my earlier catalogue.
Yeah,
lovely.
That are going to suit that acoustic more. Mm-hmm. I've also put a shout out to people on the Fan Hub page and online to say if there are any requests of mine from my back catalogue that you'd like to hear, please let me know. So there's quite a few requests that come in, but I'm probably going to veer more towards the ones that hopefully will really work especially well in that acoustic, because I think to a certain extent, it's good to cut your cloth to some degree to the room that you're in, but not let that sort of completely dominate the set list. I wouldn't do that, as it were.
When you prepare for these, Mike, are you're playing with people you don't play with all the time. Do you send them tracks? Do you get in a rehearsal room? What's the process?
Yeah, no, I mean, there's never enough rehearsal time, if you like, and everyone's busy doing other gigs as well. So I've booked 2 days of rehearsal on the 2 days before the show. I will also be sending them, the tracks and some charts so that they can sort of do homework. They've requested that. But the other thing that's hot off the press is that DJ Giles Peterson, whose name you're probably familiar with, he recently Well, in fact, when I did an interview with him last year when Changes 2 was released, he said he was going to be buying one of the new Mark 8 Rhodes electric pianos, which I have my own version of now, which is wonderful and everyone loves it, including me. He's got one in his Brownswood basement studio. And he said, oh, maybe you'd like to come back and do a session. So I sort of called him up on that and said, look, got this new track, Perplexity, coming out. So I sent him the track and I said, I'd love to come and do a trio session. So hopefully, if that's confirmed, I'm going to be doing that just before rehearsals for the Union Chapel, just with Yolanda on bass and John on drums, just as a trio thing. And so that'll be hopefully fun, but it'll also give me an extra bit of, if you like, time to sort of go through some of the stuff with the guys. But I don't know which direction he'll want to take it, because Giles will obviously lead that conversation. He'll inevitably be talking about level 42 stuff, and I can sort of, if he wants, I can sort of demonstrate how some of the pieces came to be. You know, one of his favorite tracks is Eyes Water Falling, he told me.
Interesting.
Lovely.
Which, you know, and, you know, that kind of track started with me at the time. Myself and Mark, we were sharing a little L-shaped bedsit in Tooting. And I had my first Rhodes and a Roland Chorus Echo amp. And I plugged the Rhodes into it, he plugged the bass into it. And I said, oh, I've got this chord sequence, this 4-chord sequence, like a lot of songs start off with. And I was playing it, and then he was playing the bass along, and then I started to arpeggiate it. And that was the beginning of Eyes Water Falling, if you like, just what you hear under the verse.
Right.
Da, 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 da,
Was the
da, da.
arpeggiation you playing it, or was it programmed? Do you remember?
No. This is way full programming. This is 19. No, I would have played it anyway. But I mean, yeah, it's just a you know, a C minor 7th chord. I can demo it to you. I'm not sure if I've got anything that's plugged in and live at the moment. Let me see.
Well, that'd be a gift.
Let me see if I can do that. So I have got a keyboard here. Yeah, so I was talking about being in the L-shaped bedsit with Mark King and coming up with Eyes Water Falling, which was just a C minor chord. C minor 9th chord, I suppose, because it's got that sort of D crunch. So we're just playing around this sequence. And I don't know when Mark came up with his kind of bass line with the
Yeah.
I mean, that I think developed over time, but I know at some point I started to arpeggiate the chords. So instead of just playing the chords like this in my right hand, I was going. And
We're all
then
singing in our heads.
I know.
and then the top line, you know, came later, and the next section came later, and so on. But that was kind of the origin of it.
It's beautiful when you
Beautiful,
just play the
beautiful.
chords, and you're not used to hearing it that way, you know.
No, and Mike, recently, you going back to Eyes Water Falling, and even before that, you and Phil Gould recently went to the room that Level 42 kind of started in recently.
The room where it happened.
Yeah, what was that like? Going back there all these years later.
It was amazing, because although I have actually visited the Guildhall a couple of times since I left, in fact I did a masterclass there a few years ago, I'd not actually been into what was the percussion room, where we had our first jam session and our first rehearsals, and the same place where I booked our first gig in the Student Union bar, which was in another building. But yeah, so the idea of going back to the room was we have a good friend, Eleni Gagushi, Bowie is her nickname, and she's known us for a long time. And she was commissioned to do this series of what's called Taxi Talk, where she takes someone who's been in the business a while that she has a connection with, and interviews them in a taxi, and then the taxi drives to somewhere in London that has a connection with something to do with their formative years. She's
Brilliant.
with Andrew Roachford, and she's wanted to do one with me and Phil. And so I said, well, the logical place is to go to the Guildhall because that's where it all started. And so once we actually walked into the room, and this is being filmed, it's now a harpsichord room. They've moved the percussion room somewhere else. And of course, it's much smaller than I remember it.
I was going to ask that question. It always is.
But in there, was where there was an upright piano and there was all the kind of some of the percussion. There was a couple of percussion rooms because, percussion's quite space, intensive as it were. So, but there was definitely what was the kind of put together drum kit that I was jamming on when Dominic Miller popped his head in, where I first met him because he was studying there. And then later on, when I walked in one day, Phil was playing it, and I'd never met Phil before because he was a part-time student. And then I thought, who the hell is that on the drums? And we got talking and chatting, and he told me about Mark and Boone, who were in America at the time. And then, when they came back and we finally decided to get together, that was the room where we had our first jam sessions. And Mark had by that time got a job in the music shop, Macari's in London, and had picked up the bass. And so he borrowed a bass. I was on this little upright. We had the school sort of PA system. Well, I say PA system. It's like two speakers and a microphone stuck down the back of the piano. It was like probably about 3 watts or something. But I was struggling to make myself heard. I don't know how Mark got his sound, but anyway, that was where it kind of all started. So it was very kind of wonderful and kind of emotional and nostalgic all at the same time.
That's amazing. And my last question for you, Mike, and first, I'm going to see you at Union Chapel. I can't wait.
That's fantastic.
I cannot wait and plus just hearing you play made my year. Thank you very much.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
You're about to embark next year, 2025, on the 40th anniversary of World Machine. If you can believe it, 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
When I had a chance to ask Wally Batterer a question when Julian Hall interviewed him a couple of years ago. And the question that I asked Wally is, what was his favorite memory of one of his favorite times with Level 42? And he said it was actually in the production room the day that you guys finished working on Something About You. Can you and that was a transition period for Level 42 as far as some bands are concerned. Did you understand it to be a shift from what Level 42 was doing? What was that process like when Something About You was finally complete?
Yeah, I mean, it was a very kind of seminal moment. Prior to that album, World Machine, for the previous 4 albums, basically, we'd gone into the studio. Maybe not so much the first album because we had a lot of material, but certainly the Standing in the Light album and especially the True Colors album. We went into the recording process without having all of the album composed. So we were kind of making up stuff in the studio, which we managed to pull off. I mean, basically Hot Water was an old idea of Mark's that he'd played me as a demo before the band even started working, which he'd done just on a mini Moog and a 4-track, which had the basic riffs of the song there. And we were looking for something to add to fill out the album on True Colors. And Mark kind of said, well, what about this old riff that we've jammed on but never actually done anything with? So we recorded 15 minutes, I think, of the Hot Water riff with the B section and going back to the A section, and then cut it up. And influenced by a BBC Two Arena documentary about hip hop and Africa Bambaataa.
That's right.
That kind of influenced the sampling that went on it because Mark was very into that, and we had a couple of very early samplers that he spun some stuff on, and then we came up with the top line and Phil came up with the lyrics and it became Hot Water. But with the World Machine album, there was a decision that we would spend a lot more time on the songwriting, make sure we had all the songs written prior to going in the studio. And by that time, Mark had us kind of home demo 8 tracks, so we could actually make proper demos. Not with real drums, with a drum machine, but everything else we could the arrangements more or less set. And Something About You, I think, we were all very excited about as a demo. We thought it was a great song, or could be a great song. But when we were actually doing it in the studio, it somehow it didn't have the life that we thought it would have. We were listening to the backing tracks, and they were all sounding great, but Something About You wasn't happening. And there'd been an unfortunate revealing of some of the work in progress to someone in Polydor Records, and the sort of feedback came out that maybe we needed to get some other songwriters in order to complete the album, which of course we took great offense at, as you can imagine. So that kind of, I think, redoubled our efforts, and Mark and Wally and Phil kind of knocked heads together and said, okay, how can we get some more juice out of this backing track? And so a lot of work was done on the snare sounds, doubling it up with a Simmons sound to get the kind of sound you hear on the record. Wally put some extra keyboards on it. We had the melodies already, but without words, and Phil had been writing the words, and then suddenly, out of the blue, Boone walked in with a ream of lyrics, and Mark looked at these lyrics and said, these are great, we should record these, which of course put Phil's nose out somewhat at the time, because it was kind of like his song to write lyrics on, because they were kind of divvied up between Phil and Boone, basically. But anyway, we went and started recording the vocals, and then we put the backing vocals on, and it was when Mark and I, when we came back in the studio and we played back with Julian Mendelssohn. It's the first time working with Julian, fantastic engineer. And we listened to the whole song with the new lyrics and the backing vocals. Suddenly the thing was just like, wow. And we invited the record company A&R guy into the studio, Alan Sizer. And he sat down and he listened through to the song and he went, sounds like a hit to me. Which was kind of like a validation of the faith that we'd had in the song from the beginning, but had sort of taken a dip and almost didn't make the album, as it were.
Can you imagine?
Now, I mean, this is not to say just because a record company guy says that and we like it, that it's actually going to be successful, because you don't know until it gets out.
Was that initial analysis correct from the record company? It, like you said, it didn't have much life. So did you understand what they were saying? And if you ever A/B that original version to what it became?
Well, I mean, I'm talking about, they had a cassette of all of the tracks on the album. It wasn't just Something About You.
Oh, okay.
And them saying, I was convinced, and we were all convinced, that this was going to be our best album yet, even on the strength. But the thing is, as a writer and a musician, you can already hear things that are not on the track. You can kind of fast forward and imagine how it's going to sound when it's finished, and you can hear the potential in an idea. Whereas some people, they need to literally have everything on a plate in front of them before they can hear it. And record company people, you'll hear stories from other artists, are notorious for like, you say to a record company person, just imagine what it's like with the finished vocals and the bells and whistles and strings and stuff. But sometimes they can't do that. They actually need to hear all the bells and whistles and strings, which is why it was kind of important. I mean, what was good is it kind of gave us a bit of a kick up the backside, them saying, it's like a team manager saying, you guys are rubbish. And then the team going out and saying, right, we'll show you.
Right. With the new tour, I was excited to see, not that I'm not sure I'll be able to see the actual World Machine tour, but
Come on, Winston.
well, that would beg the question that I'm not going to ask, but if I can make it, I will make it. But I was excited to see Roachford as support.
Yeah.
Always been a big fan of his, have a few of his albums, but then you mentioned, meeting up with him for that In the Room show. Did that lead to him being support, or was that already happening?
Again, I didn't meet up with him.
Oh, okay. He's just on the show.
well, Eleni had recorded his segment in the taxi.
Gotcha.
She was going to do our segment in the taxi, and then we go to the Guildhall. But by the time she'd finished Roachford's taxi segment and gone to Brixton to his location, by the time she got to us, there was a bad day in London, lots of traffic. We could only film the room section. We've still got to do the taxi bit. But I have met Roachford a few times, and in fact, the last time I met him, we were doing a show together because this same lady, Eleni Gagushi, had organised a fundraiser concert for Cuba. And Phil and I were kind of on the bill, and we did a few tunes, some of my tunes, and we did a version of Haunted House as a little set. And Roachford had also done a set, and I watched his set, and he was great. I mean, I knew he was a great singer. I've seen him singing with Mike and the Mechanics and
Right.
doing other stuff before. But to see him in front of a crowd and really get the crowd going, you know, he had a Rhodes in front of him, but he wasn't sitting down. He was standing up and playing and getting people to, you know, get involved and stuff. And, you know, he's a fantastic live performer. So I think that's a really great fit for Level 42. So I'm really looking forward to next year because I think it'll be a really good fit.
So, Mike, is the intent to play the World Machine album in its entirety, front to back? And will that be it? There'll be other songs, I assume. 'Cause
Yeah, I mean, we'll do what we did with the Running in the Family album. We will be doing that. We'll play the album. The intention is to play it as the album running order from top to bottom.
Okay.
And then I think there'll still be time for a few other songs as well, because it will take up the bulk of the show, but not the complete show, as it were.
Yeah.
So then it'll be interesting to see what else we choose. I mean, you know, inevitably, you know, we did do one tour where we didn't play Running in the Family, and we got a few complaints because it's like, oh, enough already. We played this every tour. Maybe we can do something else this time.
Right.
You didn't play Running in the Family. You know, so
Yeah.
you know, I think Running in the Family and Lessons in Love might have to be there. But hopefully, you know, we'll see. You know, we can have fun.
What's curious is Hot Water is on the US version, but it's not on the UK version. But you still could play that and say this is for the Americans.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true. I mean, it's one of the most enjoyable ones to play live, and it works very well, particularly with this lineup with the three brass guys. We have a lot of fun with it, so it's highly likely that Hot Water will be in the set anyway.
And I'll dip my toe into this question because I know it's not an easy question for you to answer, but with the US, obviously 40th anniversary, big that's the big album here in the US, that and Running in the Family. There's no dates planned for the US, and we understand, but is it when we think back to 2010, Mike, the year before when you announced that tour, the US dates weren't announced till later. They kind of actually came announced in the spring of 2010, not in the fall of 2009. So is there an outside chance that the US could see some dates?
There is an outside chance, but it's kind of, I don't like to say, but it's not really down to us. You know, the impression for people who don't know about how these things work, they think that it's the artist that chooses where you play.
Right.
The artist says, "Oh, I want to play in America, so I'm going to go and play in America." Unfortunately, it doesn't work like that. It's, you know, as you will know, there has to be a local promoter who gets excited, who then, you know, gets in touch with our agent and makes an offer that's, you know, makes sense financially to do so, because we have to bring some of our equipment with us. You know, we have to bring the guitars, definitely, you know, some of the effects. I mean, it's not a very big fly pack, as we call it, but there are certain essentials we have to bring with us, and there are costs involved in bringing all that, especially nowadays, you know, with airlines and their weight limits and freight limits and so on. There's also the whole, you know, the way that the tax system works for foreign bands coming and playing in the States. So all that has to be accomplished. So you know, it's sad to say that the the 30th anniversary tour in 2010, although it was successful by every other measure, financially it wasn't. And so and Marcus said, quite sensibly, but there's no point in us having to pay to play somewhere. He said, I don't mind breaking even. And I mean, we were supposed to have gone to Australia in 2020, and of course, nothing happened in 2020.
Right.
But it's like, the Australian promoters say, well, can't you come in 2022, 23, something like that? But at that stage, all of the shows that were going to lead up to Australia in 2020, like Japan and Singapore and maybe Malaysia and Indonesia. And so that would have kind of helped it sort of make sense financially. We can't just fly to Australia in isolation and play because it just costs too much to do. I really feel bad saying this because I know there's loads of fans in America that would love for us to come and we love to play. But it has to make sense, there has to be a kind of bottom line somewhere, So, it just takes one brave person to sort of stick their neck out, because we haven't had any new material out. So a lot of promoters will say, well, when was their last album out? Is there a record company involved? Are they going to be helping with the promotion? All of those questions. We don't have a record label. We do everything ourselves. We haven't had any new material out since Sirens. But it's a really great live show. But you have to have
Right.
gone to the live show to really appreciate what that is.
Well, if you look at the U.S. feedback you got, excuse me, in Cancun just a few weeks ago, the response was great. We see it on social media. So, Americans do like you guys.
No, I know that. I mean, the thing is, it was lovely to be able to play to Americans in Cancun because it's a resort hotel. It's self-contained. People had bought tickets that have been going to this festival for years. It was several days of different 80s artists, if you like. That's how it was kind of billed. And no, it was wonderful. And I was thinking, actually, it seemed as though people didn't recognize a lot of the material. And but they obviously know something about you and, Lessons in Love, maybe slightly lesser extent. But because we haven't played America, of course they're not going to know a lot of the stuff that we've been playing for years because we've not played there. So it's a bit of a catch-22 situation. But it was wonderful to play to people from Canada and the States again after all these years and them really enjoying it and saying how much they love the band, they love the song. And I think, it's like someone has to fit two and two together at some point. Maybe it will be us coming to a big festival and doing a splash and then a promoter getting confident, if we come and do
Yes.
Coachella or something like that, because we did the that massive festival in Quebec City. I forget what
Yeah, I
it's
remember
called.
that. Right.
That went down really well. So we're up for playing anywhere, as long as it kind of makes sense. So I would love for this World Machine tour to be, a turning point. So let's put an intention out there to the universe that something
go.
happens as a result of it.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I have a reminder. I will definitely show up for a few World Machine shows if you promise me you're going to do Handsome Rugged Man.
Oh Lord.
I'm a greedy guy.
Well, I'll put it to the committee. That's all I can say.
That's all we ask for. We all love instrumentals. That's why I'm so psyched to hear Perplexity.
Yeah, me too. And I had one last question before I forget if it's Winston or Mikey has some other fan questions before we wrap this up. But do you have any cool stories from Cancun? Did you rub shoulders with any of those artists? Any interesting stories like that? I know these happened when you do festivals.
Yeah, I mean, I met Clark Dachtler. Yeah, met up with Clark and had a chat there, in the sun by the pool, as it were. Let's see, who else did I meet there? Because we just missed who was going to be coming in 2 days later. There was someone coming in 2 days later that I would have loved to have sort of caught up with and watched. Yeah, I can't remember who it was, but no, it was more. I was more bumping in and talking to people who'd been to the concert, or a couple of the musicians from the other bands, um, some of the crew, but it was mainly the audience.
Got it.
Because we're all kind of like available. It's a bit like being on a cruise ship, except you're in a resort, as it were.
Nice.
Yeah.
Um, so that was nice, but we just really enjoyed kind of hanging out and having fun and sitting by the beach and sipping cocktails and that sort of thing. And
Yeah.
yeah, no, it was very welcome. I mean, we had 2 days off there, one day before the show and one day after the show, which is quite rare because normally it's like in and out. And I really appreciated that. And I am going to go back to Belize beginning of next year. I've got to go back because it's been too long. And especially now that my mum's passed, it feels like the call has got stronger to go and reconnect with some of my relatives over there.
Mhm.
Very good.
Yeah. All right. Well, we had to put a call out to a couple of the fans on the podcast, see if they had any questions.
Oh yes,
Some of them were quick. Well, Charles Mock asked a question about the vinyl, which we covered for Changes too.
yeah,
Mark Kouris, I hope that's the pronunciation of his name. He was asking about a new album, which we also covered.
yeah.
Corinne Graves, our friend up in Canada, or
Hmm.
up from America, her question is, what motivates you? What gets you going when you wake up?
Breakfast.
That's an easy one. Yeah, there you go. Breakfast. Done.
Breakfast. It's kind of one foot in front of the other. It depends on what's up that day. I mean, um, these now as we're coming to winter, it's breakfast and lighting the fire. I've got a wood burning stove here up in Scotland, which is lovely. It could be, I've got to make a video for the Perplexity record.
All right.
So I'm going to be working on that the rest of today and tomorrow, and probably Tuesday as well. So that's sort of that my kind of visual side, because I used to, when I was talking about the sitting room being my playroom with all the instruments in it when I was a kid. I mean, the other thing that was big with me was drawing. So music and drawing were
Mm-hmm.
both my big passions, and kind of drawing, if you like, fell by the wayside. But then photography sort of came and filled that gap, and videography. And now I've kind of got a basic editing, self-taught thing. And I mean, what's amazing about YouTube is there are so many tutorials about everything, and the kitchen sink, that you can learn a lot from people, from what they post online, or you just type in a question, how do you do this? And inevitably, someone called Brad from Minnesota will pop up and spend 10 minutes talking about how you must watch to the end of the video to get the thing, and then finally tells you.
And don't forget to
So
subscribe.
subscribe and like.
Like, subscribe. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, I absolutely love. I just bought a 3D printer, and I don't know what the heck I'm doing. And there are so many wonderful people that just shoot tutorials, and that just helps immensely. So that's very cool about the folks out there in the universe.
Yeah, no, it is. It is. It's that there's a lot of knowledge out there, and I appreciate it very much. And you know, getting on a plane to go to Chile and Mexico, I mean, that definitely gets me up in the morning, and or knowing you're going to do a show. If I'm on a tour bus and tired because it's been a noisy night or a difficult night to sleep, but then knowing you're going to get up and be in a new town, in a new city, or maybe a town you've been in before that you like, in Holland or Germany or something. It's
Mhm.
I'm very lucky. So I'm a human being. So there are some days where I kind of feel I don't want to get out of bed, like because it's cold, or I don't feel like doing my accounts or whatever. These days happen too. But mostly it's a blessed life.
I was going to say birding. You like to do birding too, right?
Oh, I do, very much so. And in fact, I'm thinking about maybe buying myself a Christmas present of some new binoculars, because I just got back yesterday and it was a lovely morning, and there were some seals out in the sea loch
wow.
here
Yeah.
playing around, and normally I only see one, but there were two or three, and they were definitely interacting with each other. So I was trying to figure out if it was a male and a female, or two rival males, or whatever. But yeah, I'm very lucky where I live. But my binoculars that I've got are not quite. The optics aren't quite perfect. There's a kind of flaw in them, and I've been promising myself a new pair for a while.
Right.
Right.
You should have
So,
videoed the seals and then put the music of Seal behind it. Like,
Well, I did try and video the seals, but the thing was, it was too far away, and I actually just sold all my camera equipment just before the Japan tour because I've decided that I wanted to start again with a new system, maybe with a new manufacturer, without mentioning any names.
Yeah.
So I tried to film it on my mobile phone, but it was too far away. You know, it's kind of like,
yeah,
what
you gotta
can
get
you-
close and then you scare them away.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, wow.
oh, that's neat. You sure that's not Nessie?
No, it's not Nessie. Nessie, you know, Nessie would. This loch here isn't deep enough for a start because Nessie's apparently a, you know, quite an old creature. Legend has it. And yeah, well, I'm in the wrong location for Nessie, but that doesn't stop loads and loads of people coming every year.
Of course.
The legend lives on.
So Angel Louise in Los Angeles, who is a professional singer, she asks, are there any current artists that you're listening to these days?
Let me see. Funnily enough, I was in Germany doing this show at Leverkusen, the last show of the run that we just did, which is at the Jazz Festival in Leverkusen, which is in
Right.
its 43rd year this year. It's an incredible show. It has an amazing roster. In fact, I took a poster home with me. And the caterers were playing some really interesting music. And I thought, I want to know who that is. So there's an artist called Nala Sinifro, who's British, I believe, although her surname is interesting. And there's an album called Endlessness, which they were playing, which was lovely. And then a guy called Duval Timothy. So, and obviously they were being played from their phones off Spotify.
Right.
So I'm always interested in hearing something that's new and fresh. And that's always been the case. Sometimes my son Angelo, well, whenever he gets in the car and I'm driving him, if he comes up to visit me, the first thing he'll do is he'll Bluetooth his phone to my car system and then he'll play his playlist. And I will hear stuff that I've never heard before because he's into everything from video game composers to, you know, kind of niche Japanese 1980s singers being backed by the sort of top cream of LA's session musicians, to much more kind of modern, very ultra programmed, very fast stuff with ridiculous piano playing that would be impossible to play, to Ludwig Einaudi, and then suddenly it will be like Freebird or Sweet Home Alabama or something will come on. So you just never know what to expect. So I love that. So yeah, I mean, at home I listen to quite a lot of classical music, and I have, you know, my own sort of record collection, which is a mixture of jazz and world music. So,
Right.
and then sometimes I don't like to listen to anything because I need the time to compose kind of in my head while I'm doing the washing up or the hoovering or looking out the window. And so I go for periods where I don't listen to anything, and then I'll get in the piano and try and come up with what I was thinking about, or try and play what the mood was that I'm feeling, and translate that into improvisation. I've been doing that since I was a kid, and that's often where ideas come from.
And we have a question from JJ Bass also AKA Jonathan Brazier, and he would like to know if you'd like to make some more level 42 music, and if yes, please include a few instrumentals. So I think JJ is going to be excited about your new single.
I hope he does like Perplexity. Yes. Um, yeah, definitely the bass line is kind of featured, although I'm playing it on the Moog. But Yolanda will be playing it live when we do it at the Union Chapel.
Nice.
But yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's going to be uh, any more level 42. I hope there will be, but Mark hasn't sort of been into recording anything recently, and we've been so busy playing all of the kind of previous stuff and showcasing, things like the World Machine album and so on. And we have so much material to choose from whenever we do a tour. We can always mix it up and play stuff we haven't played for years or stuff we've never played live before.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's the incentive. I mean, Mark said that, if we end up coming up with an idea, either of us, that sort of makes the other's hairs stand on end, then maybe that will be it. But of course, we don't have a record company at the moment, and so everything now is like, you have to invest. I'm invested thousands into changes too, and I don't even know if I doubt if I'll see all of that investment back. But that wasn't what I did it for. I did it because I wanted, to write the songs and bring the music out, and I'm really happy with that. And it's given me, a whole body of material now that I can go out and play live, because I want to do more live solo shows. That's the other plan for next year is to do, smaller scale than Union Chapel, but to go out and play live. And
Yes.
yeah,
I I I have one question for you, Mike, and it's from my husband Chad.
yes,
You're talking about what music listening to. He turned me onto this band called The Midnight, which is sort of a retro 80s synth band, and I didn't know if you've heard any of their material.
no, I haven't. I haven't at all.
Okie doke. Uh, uh, he's really enjoys that. And my last question is, and I remembered it. Our two episodes ago, rather, we interviewed Jacko,
Yes.
and I didn't know if you had a chance to read his book yet or not. One, I wanted to know if you had any reactions to his book, but secondly, do you have any plans to write a book?
Hmm. So it's interesting you say that. Well, about Jack, I'm really glad you brought him up, because yes, I must listen to the podcast because I haven't listened to it, and I am intending to buy his book and read it, because I've seen some posts about it on social media, and he's a fantastic storyteller. I already knew that from when he was in the band. Anyway, he's had some amazing incidents in his life. So yes, I'm looking forward to reading that. Um, and you're about the third person who's now talked to me about the fact that would I like to write a book? And I always thought, well, what am I going to say? And would it be interesting enough? But Pete was actually on at me on the tour bus just a couple of nights ago, saying that I should write a book, and I've got some great stories and all of that. So I suppose I used to think, maybe when I've retired, when I'm older, then maybe I'll write something. But I guess, you know, I'm getting older anyway, and retirement ain't going to happen because of Keith Richards and Mick Jagger and Paul McCartney setting bad examples for all of us. So, maybe I'll start to scribble something down, but I don't want Jacko to say, "Oh, you're only copying my idea."
Well, you're in the book, so you can put him in the book and you're even.
Yeah. Did we have any more fan questions?
Yeah, there was one more. I'll try to edit it. Lisa Devlin had a question. She's classically trained musician, and she had a few parts to the question, but I guess she was asking, one of the questions was, what's the best bit of musical or performance advice you'd ever gotten from a teacher?
Hmm.
And also, what was the best thing he ever got to play in an orchestra setting, if you did during your school years?
Well, I can certainly answer the second one first more easily. I mean, several. I mean, being a percussionist, playing in a full orchestra is just fantastic, and being in a percussion section is great because you're literally, it's like surround sound, because to the right of you are the horns, the French horns. To the left of you is the trumpets and trombones. In front of you is the woodwind, and then surrounding all that in front of them are all the strings. And when you're playing a piece like Ravel's Daphnis and Chloe Suite Number 2, or Shostakovich Symphony Number 10, or the Planet Suite by Gustav Holst, or Mahler Symphony Number 2. I mean, those are fantastic, fantastic orchestral works, and just so enjoyable to play, in a section of other percussionists within an orchestra, and in a concert hall. I absolutely love those experiences, and I'd like to do it again at some point. There is something about an orchestra that is, live. The live experience of an orchestra is just phenomenal. What was the other part of the question was, teacher's advice.
Yes.
Probably didn't come from any of my music teachers. I mean, I'm sure they did give me advice, but the one that's coming into my brain is one that I actually read in a yoga book, funnily enough, and it was by a master yoga teacher. I learnt yoga at a Shivananda center in London. Shivananda is one of the branches of yoga, if you like, and at the beginning they produced a book with the different exercises or asanas that they teach and the order that you do it in. And at the beginning of the book, he says, an ounce of practice is worth a ton of theory. And every now and again, I remember that, when I'm procrastinating and thinking, well, I haven't got time to do it properly, blah, blah, blah. And that kind of phrase comes back, and I think, you know what? It's absolutely right. I'm studying German on an app on the phone called Duolingo, which some of you might be familiar with,
Yes.
which I think is great in some ways because it really incentivizes you, and you can do like 15 minutes or a couple of lessons a day, and then they give you a run streak, and then the idea is you keep your run streak up. So I'm up to like 282 at the moment with the Germans. I'm just doing like 10 or 15 minutes a day. But it kind of feels good because it keeps it active, and it keeps it sort of flowing. And I think, and I like it when I'm on tour, particularly because I'm playing every day. When I'm at home, I'm not always playing every day. Sometimes I sit at the piano and improvise, but then I might go for a few days where I don't. And I don't think there's any harm in that necessarily, but there's something in that everyday thing that, a little bit every day is really good. It's like the exercise I was talking about earlier. I try and go for a walk every day, at least. And I think it's really good for the body, and it's good for the mind, and, vice versa. So yeah, a little bit, an ounce of practice is worth a ton of theory, I think, is a really good mantra.
Yeah. Well, Mike, I have to say we really enjoyed this conversation, and we're so thankful for your time and your insight, and it's really awesome to talk to you again. And I think once we hang up here, when Mike and I will geek out that you actually played piano for us, which is so. I was gonna.
Well, I tell you. Well, I tell you what we could do at some point in the future, if you feel like it, is that I could set up a couple of keyboards and we could do like a podcast,
Okay.
like ask me any
Okay.
question about any of the compositions or the pieces, and I could break down any parts and that sort
Oh
of
my
thing.
goodness, that would be heaven.
All right, we'll call you in about 10 minutes. No, this has been awesome.
You know how cheeky us Americans are, yeah.
That's all right. I don't mind that at all. And I really, like I say, I was saying to Bob, privately, I really would like to get across the pond myself, even if it's just me and, just to sort of, connect with some fans, maybe meet up. I'd love to do, a gig or something promotional. I mean, that doesn't flout whatever, rules that there are about this sort of thing, because it's,
Yeah.
unfortunately, you can't just show up and just, hey, let's do the show right here, like Mickey Rooney. It kind of
Mickey
doesn't
Rooney,
work like
exactly.
that.
The first thing that popped in my head.
Well, I do
Let's
think
put
that's
on a show.
I think that's possible. I really do, and I'm gonna
Yeah.
look to see if I can try to help make that happen in New York. So Winston will come back home, and
Yes, I will.
but folks, there's a lot of great stuff. Mike's gonna play us out. We'll say go out and get Perplexity when it comes out. Enjoyed the Union Chapel show.
I love it. Love it. Loved it.
And then, of course, the World Machine Tour. Get all your information at MikeLindup.com or on his Facebook page, or his Instagram. His page is really good too.
Instagram, Facebook, yes. I'm less on
Twitter.
unfortunately, I'm less on Twitter and X these days, for
that's-
reasons that I don't think I need to explain.
That's a
Yeah,
trend.
you don't have to explain it.
Yeah. I wonder why.
Yeah, the feed isn't what it used to be.
Right.
No.
All right.
Thank you so much for coming back.
Yes,
Good
indeed.
luck with your upcoming gigs. We'll see you next month, and happy holidays.
Yeah.
Thank you. Same to you.
All right, guys. For Winston Walker, Mikey Payne, Mike Lindup, I'm Bob Considine. We are leaving you now, but we'll wait till you return. See you next time, everybody. Happy Saturday.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.